A thrilling Kentucky victory on the road at Oklahoma. 83-82 was the final score. This was the Otega Oweh game. All over the internet, some people were calling it the Otega Oweh revenge game. It's disputed exactly how much revenge was at play here because the circumstances of Otega leaving Oklahoma, there's disputes on what exactly the story is. Whether Oklahoma was just like, yeah, we don't want you back, whether Otega was like, hey, I have to go to Kentucky. Either way, it seems like things were relatively cordial here. He had a nice handshake with Porter Moser after the game. Him and Jalen Moore were going back and forth. I think these two guys like each other and just were competing, and it was really fun to watch the shit talk to Jalen Moore at the free throw line. Jalen Moore pointing at Brandon Garrison saying, "You can't guard me." And then Otega Oweh just coming down in the second half being unstoppable. That was one of the best halves I've ever seen from an individual college basketball player, given the environment and the circumstances of this game. Were you as impressed as I was with Otega's 28-point performance?
Absolutely. He had what, like their final, was it like, it was like 8 or 10 points. He had the final for Kentucky. I want to say it was as well. Let me double check that just so I make sure I'm not downplaying what he did. It might have even been more, but I know he had the game winning layup. I was very impressed with Otega. I will say this, Oklahoma fans, get a grip. Like, let's calm down. Throwing a beer can at Brandon Garrison is crazy. He also would have mopped the floor with whoever threw that beer can if he didn't get held down. I'm talking like Malice in the Palace, and like when Jermaine O'Neal knocked that random dude out, like he would have mopped the floor with whoever did that. So like I hate when stuff like that happens. Um, yeah, Ortega had their it was way more than 10. I think I think he had their final 14 points actually. So my bad, Ortega. It was a special performance nonetheless from everyone involved. Um, I don't know if I think like Ortega really dislikes Oklahoma, to be honest. Like I feel like it was just like I think Porter Mosier himself would have been like, yeah, you have to go to Kentucky. If that's on the table, you need to go type of thing. So I don't know if I think he hates Oklahoma, but you could tell there was like some friend like you said, friendly banter where like they were just competing. And I think that's a great way to describe it. And the game was fiery and competitive. Even the post game was fiery and competitive too.
Yeah, it was like when Cart and I are gonna go out, but we're like in like a pregame spot that has a hoop. And then we're like six drinks deep each waiting for an Uber, and we're like ones, and then we end up like it's supposed to be just a little recreational ones, but then like 7 minutes later one of our shirts is ripped and we're like sweating, and then the whole rest of the night is just one of us shit talking the other one. That's what it felt like we're friends, we're here to like still be friends after this, but this is one of my only opportunities to F you up, and I'm gonna take it. And I think the one thing that was special that felt like it couldn't ever be replicated here was the environment with the crowd. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to act like I've watched every second of Oklahoma basketball this year, but I love watching Jeremiah Fears, so I have watched a lot of Oklahoma basketball this year. That was the only time all season I have noticed the Oklahoma crowd get into it and get after it. And there were some Kentucky fans there that probably contributed to it, but you could just tell, partially with how good Otega was playing, that this became a him versus the whole building game.
Yes.
And I love when shit like that happens. And I'll just be upfront point blank about this. Otega Oweh has been sensational this season. He's been Kentucky's best player, even when Jackson Robinson's healthy, even when the whole team's healthy. I did not know he had it like this. I did not know he had this in him to be that type of superstar where the whole building's looking you down, the entire defense is fixated on you. Jackson Robinson's not playing in the second half. Lamont Butler's fouled out. Kirk Reese is not here. Nobody on Kentucky could do anything. Let's be clear about this. You had Travis Perry and Trent Noah and Colin Chandler in the game just standing in the corner. Every single action was drawn up for Otega Oweh. And time again, he just delivered, whether it was finishing at the rim, getting to the free throw line, hitting jumpers. I'm so wowed by this. It's the most impressive individual game I have seen from a player this season.
It was special. It was special. Oddly enough, when I was watching it, I kind of chuckled. I'm like, all this back and forth is happening. There's a real world possibility he's playing in the state of Oklahoma next year in the NBA. Like that, that
Oh.
that makes the most sense to me in terms of like fit, not just for him but for the team. It makes the most sense for them to replace Lou Dort with Otega Oweh from a cap perspective, and that is the absolute perfect role for Otega at the next level too. And I thought it was special that he had that type of performance in front of this crowd for like a variety of reasons, that one included. Um, Overall, it was just a fun environment, fun game. First game, Kentucky's really been healthy too, right? Like since I mean, obviously minus Kirk Kriisa, but I think the Kerr situation's kind of it just is what it is. Like this was like our first look at March Kentucky, maybe since December. And I think they answered the bell very much so. It's a game where like talent wise, you would think Kentucky wins by a little bit more. But at the same time, the way they answered the bell against a team that was competing the way Oklahoma was, with a Lotto pick and Jeremiah Fears in a very, very amped up crowd, to leave that environment with a win is very impressive to me.
Yeah, Fears was good, although it took him 18 shots to get his 18 points, but he chipped in 8 rebounds, 6 assists. I thought you could see like why that has to be an NBA player. Jalen Moore was sensational. I know he's had some big games this year, but he was like the mismatch problem that Kentucky couldn't solve, especially at the four. And again, I haven't seen a player so demonstratively be like, "You can't guard me." No, you, the way Jalen Moore was. Man, I loved what he brought to this game. This Oklahoma team, it's been such a strange season. They went undefeated in the non-con. The polls put them like 15th overall in the country, and all the analytics said they were still like outside the top 30. The analytics were right. That's why you should always listen to the analytics. They've been a disaster in SEC play. They've gotten exposed. They're only 4-11, but I was impressed with the fight that they showed in this game. You know, they trailed early, they came back, they took the lead, and they just seemed up for the challenge. Like this feels like an Oklahoma team that still feels like they can backdoor their way into the NCAA tournament. And quite frankly, these are the types of games I think Kentucky hasn't won this year. They have struggled on the road against iffier teams that are like bubble caliber, right? They've gotten up for the big games, but have you been able to like show up and play your best against a team like Oklahoma that's desperate that circles you? And Kentucky normally has not done that. On this night, look, they did it differently than they normally do. This was not a hey, everybody gets involved game. This was Otega always going to put us on his back and everybody else chip in where you can. Give us 2 to 3 points. But I would argue this, Dion. That's best for Kentucky's March chances. I like this team's chances in March if that's the formula. If it's Otega Oweh, go bust people's ass and we'll contribute elsewhere more than I like, hey, we'll all do it together, teamwork, gratitude. You know, they need a superstar, and Otega's got to be that guy.
No, I completely agree. Every team needs a superstar. I always say this: every team needs to win a championship. I think you need one bona fide NBA dude. And the reason I say that is like this game by Otega Oweh. None of us thought he had this in his bag, right? But when you have a guy that is a bona fide next level guy playing against dudes that are still very, very good college players, very, very entertaining people we love, it's it's that levels to this moment that comes out. And I think you need Otega Oweh taking over because I'm gonna be straight up honest. I don't think the rest of them are NBA dudes. They might play in the NBA, but their NBA careers look way different than what Otega Oweh's is going to look like. Like, I'm sure Jackson will be drafted. Amari's definitely going to be drafted. Kobe Bryant will find his way onto a team just from shooting. But we're talking about a guy in Otega that I think could have, there's that magical number in the NBA where you get health insurance for life. You got to play 10 years. Otega's going to play 10. Otega, you got health insurance for life, bro. Like, you're good.
Yeah, if he was 6'7", I think he'd already be in the league. The only issue with Otega is he's a legitimate 6'4". And but like you said, Lou Dort seems like the perfect comp. If he gets in the right organization, I have no doubt that with the way he defends and what he can do, he'll be long lasting. I want to talk about the end game sequence, but first I got to give props to Mark Pope for something we've heard so often. Smart basketball people and Kentucky fans both gas up Mark Pope's X's and O's and just schematically, what is he? What is he with the clipboard? That's one of the reasons you were supposed to believe in the Mark Pope hire is just, hey, point blank, when it comes down to it, two evenly matched teams, my coach can draw up better shit than you. He's smarter than you. And this was one of the clearest indications of that to me. With all due respect to Porter Moser, who's a very nice guy, I like him. I was once in a bar with Porter Moser in Chicago, watched him put on a generational performance where he literally stood on a stool and said, "Everybody, next round's on me," like out of a movie. And I watched him sign like a $6,000 bar tab. It was special. I clinked a shot glass with Porter Moser. This was five,
Okay.
6 years ago. But Porter Moser can't sniff Mark Pope in terms of X's and O's. And there was a play very late in this game. The two coaches were going back and forth with like timeouts to drop some ATOs. And I thought Oklahoma came out of their ATOs and basically just got the ball to Jeremiah Fears and possessions ran long, which by the way, Kentucky was inspired defensively. It's still the Kentucky defense. And in crunch time, they had Lamont Butler out of the game, and they still couldn't really get anything all that clean. On the flip side, Mark Pope had one possession that I circled. This was just a beautiful play. They ran a little inverted screen set where they got the ball to Amari Williams, and then they used like two different screens. Like they screened down for Otega Oweh to cut from the top of the key to the basket, and then they used that same screener to screen for Amari Williams. So Amari at the free throw line takes one dribble to his left. He's getting downhill from this double screen that was just set. Otega's guy has to come up and help. And Amari's such a good passer, he just passed over the top to Otega. Uncontested layup in the biggest moment of the game. It was a beautiful set. It was the most tangible. Here's an example of why Mark Pope is an X's and O's genius that I have seen this season. And I think it should excite Kentucky fans a lot for what's to come in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like this guy is legitimately when it comes to coaching basketball. Yeah, the gimmicks might get old one day. Don't get me wrong, they might, but they also might not. Like he might be special at this. I think he's a special motivator, players coach, right? Like players want to play for him. That's very clear. But then once you get in game, there's zero fear. There's zero panic. There's zero like his heartbeat is the same as before that game starts. Um, he's just very cool, calm, and collected, and I think that comes out. That's why his X's and O's come out the way they do. I view X's and O's similarly to defense. I think any player can play defense if they want to. I think most coaches can draw up a phenomenal set as long as they have that calm personality that a Mark Pope has. I think some coaches panic and freak out, and you can see it on their body language when these players go back to timeouts from time to time. I'm like, he probably didn't want to call a timeout because like he's going to drop something worse than just giving it to your best player and letting them rock. That's not the case with Mark Pope. He's phenomenal. He's phenomenal. Everything he does. This team is scary in March to me. I think they're going to be even scarier moving forward too.
Yeah, not a gimmick when your players believe it too, right? And we use the word gimmick a lot just because it's an easy word to use with coaches that have slogans, but there is nothing gimmicky about what Mark Pope is building at Kentucky. So, all right, we I want one more thing on the end game sequence here. So you had basically you had the two free throws for Jalen Moore. Otega's at the free throw line chirping him. Give Jalen Moore credit. He makes both. Kentucky comes down. It was very clearly just going to be Otega make a play. And he had settled for a couple jumpers late. Otega drives. I actually want to give the officials some credit because they had called a really tight game in the second half, like a supremely tight game in the second half. And there were some calls, I don't want to say, I don't know. I don't think the calls were like wrong necessarily, but there were some calls that were quick whistles on like incidental contact. And I thought you could have called, like, this game could have been decided by whistles. And instead, Otega gets to the rim. He has to make this acrobatic finish. He makes the finish. And then Jeremiah Fears comes down. He's also clearly going to drive, try and get to the free throw line. And Otega just makes this heroic block that on replay, I watched it real time. I'm like, oh, there had to have been contact on that. I'm surprised they didn't call it. On replay, you watch it, there was no contact. It was such a perfectly timed block. So credit to the officials for not botching a call and letting this play out the right way. But more importantly, credit to Otega. What a sequence for him to make that acrobatic layup and then block the game-winning shot and then turn straight to the bench and mean mug. I'm an Otega Oweh fan for life after this.
He got that dog,
Yeah.
that dog. No. Like what did Cart say when we returned to YouTube? Demon home? Hey, Demon was back home last night, dog. Otega was the demon last night. Like Demon was home for sure. It was special.
How sick would you be if you're an Oklahoma fan watching this? Like your team's about to fall out of the NCAA tournament picture. Jeremiah Fears is going to leave. Feels like the Porter Moser era is ending, and this one guy who was good, not great last year, has blossomed into a superstar.
Very. You're what obviously more familiar with the Fears situation. He committed to Oklahoma after Otega left, right?
I think so. Yeah, yeah,
I think if Fears commits earlier, I think the main reason I'm sick, there's probably a world Otega stays. Like I think it's more of a it's more of a recruiting battle, maybe. Like Porter stands a chance. Also, if Otega's there, how good is that team? Is Otega not the perfect person to be next to Jeremiah Fears? Like
yeah,
that's such a seamless fit. And honestly, like I mean, Kentucky fans should be very happy. Otega should be very happy. I think there's a world Otega it's an even better fit for him at Oklahoma than Kentucky too with Jeremiah Fears there.
yeah, yeah. It would have been fun to watch those two together. They also could have played together at Kentucky. Kentucky was sniffing Jeremiah Fears a little bit at the end of the summer. So, yeah, in this game was fun to watch them both, but hard not to imagine one way or the other. What if they were together? And I don't
I'm
know.
gonna be honest. I don't think Jeremiah Fears is a Mark Pope guy. I don't.
No.
No, I don't know if I don't know if I see that one. I think maybe at the next level he would be knowing the that he's like a one and done mixed in with some of his personality stuff. I think it could either work spectacularly or it could work terribly. There's not a lot of middle ground there, I feel like.
Just a little me there. Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's a little much. Like it's not. This isn't like me taking a shot at Mark Pope. This is more like it's more so just like I think Jeremiah Fears is there for one reason only, and that reason's much different than why anybody else is at Kentucky.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. All right. All right. Well, congrats to Kentucky. Congrats to Otega Oweh on such an incredible performance. This was one of the most fun games for me to watch all season.